to stand up and to lead a song with some motion before I talk, so everybody's awake, at least for a couple minutes. If you want to open up your Bibles to Genesis chapter 1, we'll be there. Genesis chapter 1 this morning. Let me just say before we get started, it is very nice to be home. Thank you for the welcome, and I like whenever everyone says, how was your trip and all of this? And I should not be such a negative person all the time, but I hate to travel. And so Brooke even said it this morning. She said, how was your trip? Never mind, I know you ate. But I don't want to always be the guy who says bad. It was a good trip, but it is always good to come home. So it's nice to see you all today. There are a lot of visitors with us today, and I expect for the same reason, maybe the thick of vacation travel, summertime travel, as I don't know why you're here, but I would assume that's what it is. And I'm not quite sure that I could say rightly that half of our group is doing the same thing, but there's a lot of our people out, which is, I suspect, why you're here. So thank you for filling in for that while they're gone. There's a lot of things to say right now, and I probably will just leave it at that. Make sure that you keep up with the emails with the church family, but Sam's getting married tomorrow. If you want to send him a text message. He doesn't say a whole lot, but he's a part of our family, and so Sam and Abby will be getting married and going on a honeymoon, and they'll be back here, and I think that's where the entire Smith clan is, and Brianna, Brianna's mom is, they say that she doesn't have long to live, maybe not even through the weekend. So, I think about this all the time. Your mom is your first love. She's the first person who loved you and the first person that you loved back. And so losing a mom is rough. And so she's away from her family. So it would be nice if we as a family of God's people could do our part to help her during this time. That's probably enough for now. If you want to look at Genesis chapter 1, I'm going to start in verse 14. I want to tell you that I was not going to spend time on every single one of these chunks, and I'm probably not anyway. But we have already, we've spent a lot of time. We spent one lesson, and we said, in the beginning, God created. And we just talked about God and what it means to be God and who God is and his relation to time. He's before the beginning, he will be after the end, he's God, and that's what it means to be God. And so we talked about, in the beginning, God created. And then we spent an entire lesson talking about what that means for us. If he is God and this is his relationship to time, outside of time, bigger than all things, then this is what we should think about him, and this is how we should live in relation to him, and all of that. That was that second lesson. And so let me tell you, today, we're going to do a lot of the same stuff, except for this. That first lesson was God in relation to time. This lesson is going to be God in relation to everything in creation. That's going to be the main point of what we do. But I'll just tell you, since we have so many visitors here today, we spent the next lesson after that in verse 2. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And so we talked about what that means. And then the next lesson after that, we talked about how God fixes that. God forms the formless, fills what's empty, lights the dark, and orders the chaos, the deep and the sea and all of that stuff that's around us. And so that was, I guess, 4 lessons after that. And one of the things that he does is, this is what we did with the first couple of days. God said, let there be light. He lights the darkness. God separated the sea. The darkness was over the face of the deep. And so on the second day, God created an expanse so that the water's up there and the water's down there. But he created boundaries and borders, and he drew lines. And then he named things, and he said, that's what that's called, and that's what this is called. And that's what he also did on day 3 whenever he created the land up out of the waters. And here's the boundary, and God says, this is what you are. You're the water. This is what you are. You're the land. And the water cannot come up on the land. There's a boundary here that exists. And that really, that really has a lot of practical value for the world that we're living in right now. There's a lot of people who don't quite understand that God has created boundaries and named things, and that's what you are, and this is your meaning and purpose in existence. So that's what we've done. I was going to move on into Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26 instead of doing the next 3 days, but I was doing some reading about day 4, and I saw a lot of stuff that was just really interesting to me that I thought was worth sharing, and so I think we're going to do that. Look at chapter 1 and verse 14. God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the 4th day." So the 4th day and the description of the sun and the moon and the stars and their creation is the second longest in this entire list. The first longest is going to be day 6, when God creates the land animals and man, and you would expect that one would get a lot of attention. But this is the second longest day, and I think that we can say this. It makes some sense why in the world that Moses was living in the world that God was revealing himself to, the sun and the moon and the stars were a really big deal to the people who lived in that world. Here's just one way of setting this up to think about what we're talking about right now. The most obvious reason for the detail in the 4th day's description is the importance of the astral bodies in ancient Near Eastern thought. In neighboring cultures, so in the world that we're talking about right now, you've got the Jews who live in Palestine, although they're on their way when Moses is writing this, but they're coming out of Egypt. There's Babel, there's Babylon, ancient Babylon, Mesopotamia, you have the Hittites. And what he's saying in this ancient world map is he says, to these ancient Near Eastern cultures, the sun and the moon and the stars have some of the most important gods in their pantheon. The stars were often credited with controlling a human destiny. And that's even true still today. Jiminy Cricket, right? When you wish upon a star, that's where I'm going to get the stuff that I want in life. And the stars are used for navigation. And so this is how I tell where north is and where I'm going, and I keep track of where I am. Why not use the stars to apply to the rest of my life and where I am and where I'm going and who I'm going to be in? And so you've got the idea of the sun and the moon and the stars as really big deals in the ancient world. I'm not going to throw up pictures. I had a bunch of pictures in here, and I thought, you don't care about that stuff, but here's something for you to do. I was really shocked when I did this, because what I wanted to do was I wanted to say, hey, look, the Jewish people are coming out of Egypt, and the primary god of the Egyptians is Ra. And Ra is pictured as a man with a hawk head and a sun over his head, because he's the sun god. He is everywhere, and the guy who is above everything, above all the gods. And so the sun, the primary god. Whenever you go up into Mesopotamia on the north side of where the Jewish people were, you have the god Assur, and also a sun god. So here's what you do. Look this up. If you if you have some time later today, and you might just type it in your phone now or write it down so you don't forget, or text me later down the road. Look at the Wikipedia article on list of solar deities. That's the thing that you look up on Wikipedia. List of solar deities. And it just goes through and it says, here is every culture and every body of people that we know about throughout history who has had a sun god. And it is a lot. You got to be like, on my computer, I got a wheel, and it's like scroll, 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 scroll. Here are all of the sun gods. And as you look through the list of sun gods, most of them are the primary god of that culture. And so, yeah, it's not surprising that God spends a lot of time here talking about the sun and the moon and the stars to a group of people. And this is point number 1. We saw it just a second ago. The point of Genesis 1 is that God created them. They are not eternal, and they are not gods themselves, and they are not worthy of worship. God created them, the sun and the moon and the stars. And so here's just a couple of things to see that God has said this. He takes this really seriously in the Bible. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, starting in verse 15, watch yourselves very carefully, since you saw no form on the day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb, that's Mount Sinai, out of the midst of fire. Beware lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourself. So here's the thing. As you strive to know God and worship God, number 1, don't make a form of him. When he talked to you out of Mount Sinai, you did not see a form. Don't make a form of him. The second thing that he says is, don't make a carved image of it, of anything. Don't make a carved image of the form or the likeness of a male or a female, not of a person, the likeness of an animal that's on the earth, the likeness of a winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water under the earth. This is the last thing. And beware lest you raise your eyes to heaven. And when you see the sun and the moon and the stars, all the hosts of heaven, you be drawn away and bow down to them and serve them. Things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heavens. When you look up into the sky and you see the sun and the moon and the stars, don't honor them as gods. Don't worship them. Don't elevate them beyond anything, because the point here in Genesis 1 and also in Deuteronomy 4 is they are created just like fish and birds and animals. Don't do it. Don't worship these things. Here's another one, Deuteronomy 17 in verses 2 through 5. If there is found among you within any of your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, a man or woman who does what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God and transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods and worshiped them, or the sun or the moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have forbidden, and it's told to you and you hear of it, then inquire diligently, and that person gets put to death. That's the point. Don't worship what God created. Worship the Creator, not the created, not the creation. That is, I think, the big point here. And I've got some things that I'll say about this, but I write this down because, you know, I'll just tell you from my perspective. If I were going to choose to worship anything other than God, I think that the sun would be it. The idea of a cow or a fish or a bird just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, they're dumb and they're filthy and they're animals. It doesn't make any sense to me to say, oh, hey, look at that unconscious, non-thinking, stinky animal. I think I'll worship it as a god. That doesn't make any sense to me. But the sun, I mean, you think about the sun, it's how we survive. First of all, without the sun, we would not exist. And there's all kinds of talk about this all the time. I mean, if the sun gets a little hotter, we're all just going to burn and die. So it keeps us alive, and it could kill us. So at least it's important in that way. And not only that, but it's big and ever-present. You see it. It's the thing that gives us light. And look up in the sky at any point in the day, even a cloudy day, and you can see where the sun is. And the moon, I don't really care so much about the moon. But the stars, if you go out at night, I think this is true for most of us. If you go out at night and it's quiet and it's a clear day and you look up at the stars and they're bright, you feel something. I mean, don't we? We feel something. It's a sense of beauty and a sense of smallness compared to all of this, and they're mystical. And what is that? It's glimmering and shining, and it moves around through the night, and here's pictures, and it's at least something. And what God tells us, and the picture that God paints for us here in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights." And we'll read some more about this in just a second. But here's the point. No matter how awesome they are, or how relevant and life-giving they may seem, or how they make you feel, or how mystical it is at night, and whatever kinds of emotion that spurs in you, they are still created things that God said, let that be. They're not gods. They're not even worthy of worship. Number one, God created the sun and the moon and the stars. And so that elevates God. Remember, I said when we go through Genesis 1, one of the things that we're really trying to do is to know who God is and what God is like. He's bigger than even the biggest thing we know. The sun and the moon and the stars. Okay. Number two. This is the thing. I was going to skip over this because, I said that stuff just a second ago, and you know this. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. But this is one that I thought, wow, I never noticed this before. Not only are they created and that God is bigger than them, God doesn't give them any more attention than they deserve in this text. And that was one thing that I've never paid attention to that I think is really interesting. It's almost like God doesn't dignify them any more than he has to. For example, read it one more time and look at what he calls them. He doesn't even call them the sun and the moon. He's not going to give them names like everything else. Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. In verse 15, and let them be lights in the expanse. In verse 16, and God made the two great lights, the sun and the moon. He does not call them the sun and the moon. And I know that you probably will realize this, and this is overkill, but look at Genesis 15 with me. Genesis 15 in verse 12, just to make the point that Moses and God and the Hebrew language knew the word for sun. It's not like, well, he called them the great lights in the sky because that's the way ancient people talk. No, there is a word for sun in verse 12 as the sun was going down. And you'll see the sun later on in verse 17 if you look. In chapter 37 in verse 9, this is Joseph who has a dream. And this one is useful. I should just come straight to this one because it mentions both of them. Chapter 37 in verse 9. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down before me. So God says in Genesis 1, let there be light. I'm going to put the lights in the sky. And this is what I'm going to call them. The great light is going to be in the day, and the lesser light is going to be in the night. And you know what makes this stand out even more than anything else up to this point is that we've done entire lessons about how God has named things. And so it really kind of stands out as odd and out of place and different in Genesis chapter 1. Look at Genesis chapter 1 and verse 5. God called the light day. In my Bible, day is capitalized as a proper noun. This is your name, day. And the darkness he called night. And that word is capitalized because this is your name. Jump down to verse 8. God called the expanse heaven, capital H, heaven. And there was evening and morning the next day. And he does the same thing as you go on in verse 11. He calls, I guess starting in verse 9, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place, let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. That's its name. And the waters were gathered together, he called seas. So God has spent a lot of time up to this point creating things and making boundaries and saying, this is your name. And then he creates the sun and the moon and the stars, which are primary gods among the people in the day. And he says, yeah, they're just lights. That's the big light. That's the small light. The reason for this choice of terms may be due to the fact that these words, which are very similar in other languages, the sun and the moon, these are the names of gods that other people worship. Thus, the text is deliberate attempt to reject out of hand any kind of making them gods or acknowledging them gods of the lights by ignoring the concrete terms and using a word that speaks of their function. Look at Job chapter 31. I've got the text on the board behind me right now, but probably you should just turn there because there's some stuff to see in Job 31. Men especially. Job 31 is a neat chapter because, you know, Proverbs 31 is the worthy woman. Job 31 is almost the equivalent. It's like the worthy man. Job says, no, I have not done anything to receive this punishment from God that I'm living through right now. I've been a good guy. And Job 31 is him going through the list to say, these are all the things that I've done to be a good and worthy person. And the chapter is useful in that way for a man. Oh, and also you women who are thinking about getting married someday. This is the kind of man that you're looking for. This is what a good and worthy man looks like. And so in verse 1, 31 in verse 1, I made a covenant with my eyes. How could I gaze at a virgin? So Job says, I've controlled myself in this way. In verse 5, if I've walked with falsehood and my foot has hastened to deceit. Job says, I am a man of integrity. In verse 9, if my heart has been enticed towards a woman, if I've lain in wait at my neighbor's door, he says, I flee youthful lust. Okay, one of the things that Job says about himself is verses 24 through 28. Listen to this. I call this in the margin of my Bible. Job says, I'm not a materialistic person concerned about things and stuff. 24. If I have made gold my trust, or called fine gold my confidence, if I have rejoiced because my wealth was abundant, or because my hand had found much, I've not put my trust and my pursuit in life in things, physical, material things. How would I get those things and pursue those things in the ancient world? Verse 26, if I have looked at the sun when it shone, or the moon moving in splendor, and my heart has been secretly enticed, and my mouth has kissed my hand. So I'm looking at the sun or the moon, and I'm speaking to them, and I'm asking them and praying to them, they're kissing my hand. I love you, sun. I serve you, stars and moon. That's how he describes going to these other gods or these other things in the pursuit of stuff. In verse 28, this also would be an iniquity to be punished by the judges, for I would have been false to God above. And so the main idea here as we think about what God created is not only that they are created things in the first place, but they certainly are not worthy of any sort of mention or devotion or service or worship. God is the one who created and we worship him, not these things. And not only that, especially thinking about the stars and how they give us direction, we don't look to the sun and the moon and the stars for what we need in life. I think this is why the ancient people would have done that so much. I mean, the sun is how your plants grow, and the rain. This is how you live and you survive. And I want material possessions like Job. And so I'm going to wish upon a star. Look up to the sun. Hey, you're kind of a big deal. Can you give me the stuff that I want? And God says, don't do that. They are created things. They are not God himself who is the creator. Number 3, this is the last thing that we'll mention today before we start to make some point out of all this. Not only are they created, and not only does God fail to dignify them by naming them like every other thing, they're servants of God who exist only to fulfill his purpose. And I think that you see it in the structure in a really good way. If this is right, and Genesis 1:14 through, 19? Yeah, if it's intended to be laid out in this way, in the chiastic structure, then what the structure is doing is it's saying, here are the lights, and here's what they're for. This is why God created them. So number 1, they separate the day from the night. This is the matching point in verse 18. They separate the light from the darkness. They're just a clock. It's nice to have the sun and the moon and the stars, but in this function, they serve only as a clock. And to worship the sun and the moon and the stars would be just as silly as me taking off my watch and bowing down and worshiping the clock. But as you start to think about this, there are a lot of people who make their time their God. So think about it in that way. And let them be for they serve. For signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And this is what they do. They rule over the day and the night. They're a calendar. They tell us when the winter's about to be here. The sun and the moon and the stars. And they tell us when Passover is approaching. This is this month that we're going to do this thing in order to remember God and worship God. And as you think about this, there are a lot of people who just think time is the most important thing, and I got to do this, and I got to do this, and I got to do this. There are a lot of people who live by the worship of their calendar and all the stuff that I do and all of the things that I serve. And finally, this is just a third thing to think about. Letter C, let them be lights in the expanse of the heaven to give light upon the earth. They're a flashlight. They make it so that we don't have to live in dark. And to paint the picture in this way is not to say, wow, God created a super awesome thing. That's true. The universe and the sun and the moon and all the stars, it's super awesome to see all of these things. But they're still created, and they only exist for the purpose of serving God who created them. That's the bottom line. That's the thing that we're thinking about in all of this. 3 functions. So it is sufficient to recall all of the people in the ancient world. They all worship these different gods, astral deities in most Mediterranean religions. The sun, the moon, and the stars are divine. As such, they're autonomous bodies. They're up there, independent. Nobody tells them what to do. They do it by themselves all the time. Around each of them focus various kinds of religious cults and devotees. In the light of this emphasis in Genesis 1, it's saying that these lights are not eternal, they are created, and they don't exist to be served, but to serve the one who created them. And here's the thing, just like you and I. We don't exist to be served, but to serve the one true God, the creator of all things. So, some takeaways. You can think of your own. There's only one place to go for light. And when I say light, I'm not talking about flip the light on, boom, there's the light. I'm talking about illumination and the big questions in life. Who am I, and what's my purpose, and where am I from, and where am I going? That's light. There's only one place to get that. And it's not any created thing. It's God in heaven. There's only one place to find life and survival, and it's not the sun or the rain or the moon or the stars or any created thing. God is the creator of all things and the giver of life. There's only one place to find direction in life. And it's not by looking up at the stars and wishing upon a star and asking your horoscope or whatever other kind of nonsense people come up with. It's God and His Word that He's provided to us. This is where we find out how to live, because He is the creator of all things. And there's only one thing worthy of any sort of devotion and life-giving effort and worship. That's the one who made all of the other stuff, whatever that stuff might be. So God made the sun and the moon and the stars. Here are some things that we can take away from that. If you are here this morning and you're not a Christian, I know that we have not spent our time today talking about how to be a Christian and what it means to be a Christian, but indirectly, that's really what this whole conversation is about. Christianity is a person who says, I'm going to forsake all other things, the sun, the moon, the stars, my money, my status, even my own life. I'm going to take my life, I'm going to forsake all things, I'm going to take my life, die to myself, I'm going to be buried in the waters of baptism, and when I come up out of that grave, now I have been born again to serve Jesus, the one true God and creator of all things, the one who is truly, genuinely worthy of my life and my devotion and my worship. That's what Christianity is all about. If you're ready to do that today, or if you want to ask more about it, I'd love to talk with you and study with you about how this looks and what we're supposed to do. But the takeaway from this lesson, don't serve something that's not worthy of serving, no matter what it is. Serve God, who created all other things. If you're here this morning and we can help you to obey this gospel, come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song.